Great. Okay. Brilliant. I think we can get moving then. So thank you so much for joining us, guys. It's fantastic to have you all here with us. And I think we've got a really, really exciting topic that a lot of people can really connect with here. And it's all about unlocking the potential in our client conversations. We've got some amazing panelists here, some real experts that are going to help us with this. And we know from working with accountants and bookkeepers that you guys are amazing at finding the answers to clients' problems, but often it can be a little bit harder to extract their goals and their challenges from those conversations. And we know it's a completely separate skill. So we want to just have a chat today to understand what that skill looks like. We've got the expansive expertise of all the guys here on the panel. So without further ado, before we get into those conversations, I think we should introduce everybody. So firstly, we've got Viv here from The Gap. Viv, do you want to say hello?
Hi, Jack, and good morning. It's good evening here in New Zealand. I'm in Mount Maunganui in New Zealand, and you're wondering why this Kiwi's joining you. So I'm a co-founder and director of The Gap, and these three wonderful panelists, Marie and Tamsin and Glenn, are Gap firms, as well as obviously GoProposal customers as well. So 7 years ago, Mark Jenkins, he's a chartered accountant. I'm also a chartered accountant. Between us, I think we've got about 35 years of public practice experience. We created The Gap, and we now have about 120 firms in the UK who are really taking a lot of the learnings from The Gap and applying that to their client conversations. And it's quite a different skill to go from telling your clients what to do as advisors because you are the expert to really drilling down into what's really keeping them awake at night. So that's the journey we're on with all of our firms in the UK, and it's a stunning journey. And these three panelists here today are a living proof that whilst it's not an easy journey to take, the benefits are massive.
Fantastic, absolutely, Viv. And everyone that we've interacted with that has used The Gap has just sang the praises of what you guys do. So it's fantastic to have you here with us. Awesome. So should we go on to yourself? Glenn, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Jack. Morning, everybody on the session. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Glenn Martin, and I'm the owner of Avery Martin Accountants, which is an accounting practice based in County Durham, Northern England. And sort of our take on the accountancy thing is we want to work with a smaller client group, but just do a lot more with them. So, you know, we're not really, we obviously do quite a bit of compliance work, but it's really about working with people who've got the right mindset to grow the business, and for us to be actively involved in that. We're not just, you know, wanting to bang loads of tax returns through or whatever. That's our sort of how we operate.
Fantastic. Awesome. Thank you, Glenn. Tamsin, do you want to say a quick hello?
Hi, everyone. I'm Tamsin from Seed Accounting Solutions. We're based in Southwest London. We specialise in small and micro businesses around sort of England, Scotland and Wales. We haven't reached into Northern Ireland just yet. We, similar to Glenn, we're sort of looking at working with clients who sort of have a certain type of mindset and achieve certain goals. So we've sort of focused on the importance of the working relationship with our clients, and we're trying to move away. The main bulk of our clients are tax and compliance, but it's also about trying to sort of help them achieve their life goals. And that's really what we're sort of passionate about at Seed Accounting Solutions.
Amazing. Fantastic. Thank you, Tamsin. And finally, Marie, would you like to say a quick hello?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Marie Donaldson. I'm the founder and director of Fresh Clarity. We are based in rural Shropshire, and we work with, similar to Glenn and Tamsin, we work with small businesses, but really helping them to create the right environment so that their business can thrive. So building those relationships has been really important with working with those businesses. So yes, that's what we do.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, Marie. And like I say, guys, we're really happy to have this panel here to speak to you today. And just before we sort of got together and we started going with this, I just asked those guys what they thought the problem was that was facing accounting businesses when it came to client conversations. And from drilling down into that, I think they've come up with some really nice ideas. So firstly, the idea currently is there's a lot of tech out there. There's a lot of things that can get automated, a lot of electronic communications via email, WhatsApp, and often tech is replacing that face-to-face discussion. It's becoming a bit of a blocker to that rather than the enabler it should be. It should just be enabling those face-to-face conversations, but in fact, it's meaning that we're shying away from them a little bit too much. And the distance that's created by this tech leads to a bit of a perfect storm where we're making assumptions on our clients and their businesses before we've had the real conversation to find out what's going on, which obviously causes problems later down the line. And ultimately, without these meaningful conversations, we can't have a meaningful relationship with these clients. And without a meaningful relationship, there's no way that we can help them to the best of our ability. So what we want to get into today is to understand how we can overcome that problem and get a little bit of a learning from the guys here and what they do to make sure they're unlocking everything they possibly can from those conversations. So I think if we get moving forward, Viv, do you want to open us up with the first question?
Sure, and I'm going to put this one to Marie. Marie, how hard is it? How do you get your existing clients? It's possibly a bit different with new clients, but how do you get your existing clients to start kind of open up about their business and personal goals and start expressing what those are when they're kind of used to talking to you about compliance matters? They're used to talking to you about accounting and tax matters. How do you start to get them to, how do you switch that conversation over to the business and personal goals?
Yeah, I think it can be difficult. It's not an easy transition, definitely, both for ourselves and for team members and for clients. But it's really about asking some simple questions. I think, getting back to the basics of, why did they start their business? So if you're struggling for a first question to ask, existing clients, go back to the beginning. Why did they actually start their business? Because just from that one question, you can find out so much about their business, what they wanted. You might hear that they were made redundant and they didn't like the feeling that they weren't in control of their future. So they set up their business so they could have control. And that straight away gives you a real good opening into lots of other questions and information about the client. But it's not easy to go from just, here are your accounts, these are the numbers, if you've got any questions, we'll sign them off. So it is sort of building steps into that process. So with the gap, we use the pre-work. We use a lot of the pre-work that's within the gap. So if you're not a gap member, there's some pre-work. It's almost like homework for the clients. So we send that to them before the meeting and ask them some questions on there that aren't just about the numbers. It's actually about, how do you feel about your progress this year? Is it what you expected? So that when you come to have the meeting with clients, you've already got some information to then build on during your meeting and to start to ask some different questions around the figures. So it's not just about talking about the figures and the tax that's due or not due. So yeah, it's a really kind of starting there.
So even for example, your annual accounts review meeting, you send that pre-work, and that means that the client has to sit down and really do a little bit of soul searching about, do they understand the numbers, for example? Have they achieved as well as they thought they would for the year? What are the problems and challenges that they'd like to talk about at the meeting? So do you find that it really makes them really think about their business, and they therefore come to the meeting in a better state of preparedness, which means do you find you have a better meeting because of that?
Oh, definitely. Not only because the client has come prepared, they've got a new expectation of what's going to be discussed in the meeting, but also for myself, I can see where the concerns are for the client, maybe the things that haven't gone quite so well or the things that have gone really well. And during the meeting, you can pick up on those things. So I had one yesterday. The client had completed the pre-work beforehand, so I knew that they were concerned about the level they were spending on software. I knew that they wanted to share their plans for some changes that they were making. So straight away, I'm prepared in the meeting of, what we need to focus on. There was nothing in the pre-work around the tax, the figure, it wasn't all numbers based. It was more about what they wanted, that they were quite happy with their progress. But there were a few things they wanted to look at. Whereas if I hadn't asked those questions before, I just wouldn't have known until we come to the meeting. And then, during the meeting, you're finding out facts and reacting to them rather than actually giving value in the meeting. So with the pre-work, the meetings become more valuable with the clients. The client gets more out of it because we're focused on the things that are important to them. But there's structure to it. So I always think that every meeting you have with a client, there should be a purpose and some kind of structure. But we've got to remember it's not an interview. So we don't want to be sat there sort of interviewing the client and making them feel really awkward, but having some structure and purpose for each of the meetings we have with clients just, I think, enables me to give more value to clients in the conversations that we have.
Yeah, and I guess, well, first of all, they're doing the heavy lifting. They're the ones who are putting their heart and soul into the pre-work. It's their meeting, isn't it? We kind of forget that it's their meeting. But I guess it means that you can actually drill down into those issues. And so you're not having a meeting of discovery where you're trying to figure out where their head's at. You kind of know that before they get to the meeting, and you can focus on the solutions. So how did your clients react when you started, putting these structures in place, better structures? Many of them are a little bit invisible to the client, but the pre-work is very visible to them.
Visible, yeah.
Yeah. Did you get any clients say, why do I have to do this? And what do you do if a client doesn't do the pre-work, if they just don't do it in time?
Yeah, so I think initially we were probably guilty of making assumptions. So as Jack said earlier about this idea that we make assumptions. So we made assumptions that, it's going to be really difficult to implement this. Clients just aren't going to want to fill it in. But actually, I've been quite surprised that majority of clients have actually put the effort into filling in the pre-work. Some clients fill it in, but don't necessarily provide a lot of information. You can certainly get a sense of who's put effort into it and who hasn't. Yeah. But they have filled it in. If they don't fill it in, Louise in my team is hot on making sure that she follows up after the deadline if they've not completed it, and then reschedules the meeting if they're not going to get it completed. So we're really starting to sort of set that level of expectation and that standard of, that sort of mutual respect really of each other and each other's time, because we know that if they don't fill the pre-work in, the meeting, they're not going to get as much value out of the meeting. So there's benefit to both to complete it. So and it is difficult to reschedule meetings when clients don't complete the pre-work, and some of them initially don't like it, but they then do complete the pre-work because they realize actually if they want the meeting they've got to do it.
So it sets up a level of commitment, expectations. And what you're doing is you're doing the right thing by them. You want them to get maximum value from the meeting. Yeah. And to do that, you need to understand where they're at, what they understand, what they don't understand, what's going well for them, what's not going well. Because you're not going to see all of their problems and challenges. You're not going to see what their personal and business goals are in those financial statements, are you? You haven't
you've got to ask questions. You're almost that sort of annoying child that asks, why, without being annoying, obviously. But the more questions we ask, the more information that we're going to get. And the conversation is a two-way thing. It's not just about us talking at the client. It's also about us listening. Listening for those. Sometimes it's those throwaway comments that clients make that actually open up quite a lot of information, right? I'm not going to have a holiday this year, or we're not having a holiday for the next 2 years because we're saving up for a big holiday. All of those little things, just, it's an opportunity there to say, well, actually, okay, well, how can we help you, get that holiday you want? How, what is it that's not working? But unless you ask the questions, you know, we are in a position where we make assumptions, and we have to make assumptions because we haven't asked the questions. And I'd much rather be asking questions and getting the client's answer and responding to that than carrying on making assumptions.
So it's about listening to understand.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, Jack, over to you. That's amazing. That's quite a transformation for you, Marie, and I know that it wasn't overnight.
No,
because it's a different way of communicating with your clients around their problems and challenges and goals. Yeah,
that's it. It is, you know, we've always wanted to have good relationships with clients, but we didn't necessarily have the right tools and structure to what we were trying to deliver. So having that structure, you know, has really just taken things up a level and just made it so much easier, not just for me, but for the team as well, to have those conversations.
Fantastic.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Maria. And I love that idea of tuning into throwaway comments, because that really is a skill, and there's so much stuff that we can get from that. So thank you. And also, guys, just as we're going through, don't forget to post any questions about that, because there's a lot of great ideas in there, what Marie was saying. So please make sure you get your questions in, and we'll have plenty of time to run through those at the end. Great. Okay, so I just want to address a question to you, Tamsin, and I just want you to talk through what your technique is for facing up to difficult topics of conversation and making sure that you're tackling those in a constructive manner.
Yeah, well, I have to say it doesn't ever really seem to get any easier having difficult conversations. I still get myself a little bit worked up every time I have to have one. However, there are things that we can do to make a stressful situation less stressful. And actually for us, a lot of it is just approaching it in a quite a formulaic way. So again, going back to sort of sending some pre-work just so that you've got an idea of you know, what they want to discuss, or if there's going to be anything that sort of hits you in the face. You don't want any surprises when you're having those conversations. So kind of having that system in place can really help. If you've got delivery notes in the Gap, they often have delivery notes when, you know, for certain meetings. And that can be quite helpful as well if you've made some notes, so that you make sure you cover off everything that you want to talk about. But really for us, a lot of it is just about bringing it back down to a sort of a really personal level. We quite often talk about, you know, the problems that we've faced in our experiences and our own personal experiences in business, and things like that can really help. Just a bit of empathy. And I really like, there's in the Gap, there's a whole mindset library, and one of them, which was introduced to me anyway early last year at the start of the pandemic, was Backbone and Heart, and it's really about sort of having that empathy and understanding their client situation, but also sticking by, you know, your boundaries, your values, and everything that's important to you. And I think, you know, just having a couple of those types of mindsets can be really helpful. Another mindset that we've used sometimes in sort of situations of conflict is called the AQUA model, which is about, you know, sort of basically understanding the problem and then providing a solution. And I think, you know, just having the confidence to just go and have a conversation with a client. And I think having those difficult conversations is much better than not having it, because if you don't have those conversations, it ends up just becoming an even bigger problem. So sometimes just sort of feeling the fear and doing it anyway is the best approach, even if it is slightly terrifying. And I would say that the more conversations we've had, the easier it becomes. As I said, it's still not easy. It's not like I can just breeze into a difficult conversation and not get sweaty palms in the process. But, you know, it can really help. You know, just doing them, and you know what works. The more you do them, the more you know what works. But I think, you know, we've done a lot of sort of repricing conversations as well in the last couple of years, and again, kind of going back to that formulaic approach of, you know, using GoProposal to, you know, create our prices. And you know, we blanket changed all of our sole traders, the sort of really small sole traders, about 2 years, I can't remember now, I don't know if it's 2 years or 3 years ago, I've got no concept of time anymore. And we went with the approach of just emailing everybody, and it was about 60 people at the time. And we just explained in a really sort of straightforward manner about why we were doing it, the reasons for changing the prices, basically admitting to the fact that we'd been undercharging and the problems that that caused us as a small business. And, you know, gave them the opportunity to book in a call to discuss it. You know, we weren't sort of shirking away from having those conversations. It was just, for us, it was the easiest way to reprice a large quantity of people when you know, we didn't have enough resource in-house. And so, yeah, so using sort of GoProposal, you know, using anything where you've got a sort of a structure in place can kind of take the emotion out of some of those harder things, I think. Yeah, so that's really where we're at.
That's really nice. I love the idea of relying on structure when it's a sort of a nervous conversation. So you mentioned there about the fear quite a few times. I think that's really interesting, because you saying that it never goes away is something I think the people here can connect with, because accepting that it's never going to go away, but have the structures in place that's going to allow you to deal with that fear is really important. So just I'd love to explore just a little bit further about when you're building up to a conversation that you know is going to be difficult, what's sort of your preparation for that? Like, what would you tell yourself? How do you deal with that? How do you make sure that it's going to go the way that you want it to?
I think ultimately it comes down to, you know, what have you got to lose by having that conversation? And I know it's quite a loaded sort of question, I suppose, but, you know, really it's like what is the outcome that you want as a business owner or as the accountant to have? What's the outcome that you want? And ultimately, you know, we want what's best for our client, but we also need to do what's right for our business. And you know, we've had conversations with clients. We've never actually parted company with any clients unamicably. It's been one of those things where actually we've had a conversation, we've agreed it's not working, and we just move on. And I think really, if you approach it with what is the worst that's going to happen, I think so much of the fear, especially around repricing conversations, is actually, you know, we might lose the client. But the thing is obviously if we're trying to reprice them, it's because they're either not getting the level of service that they need in order to succeed and achieve their goals, or it's because we're undercharging them. And so if they can't see the value in the service that we're providing, or we're undercharging and therefore we're making a loss on that client, then obviously, you know, there is no loss. I mean, obviously there is a little bit of a, you know, it feels like you're losing money when you lose a client, but actually if you're making a loss on them in the long term, it'll all come back and hit you in the face. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I don't really do too much sort of, you know, sort of talking to myself or anything like that. I think I'm quite unusual in some respects, in the fact that when I have a difficult conversation, I try not to think about it too much. I just kind of, you know, I've got all of the systems in place. I try not to think about it, and I just kind of go in and do it. Because if I start thinking about it too far in advance, I start panicking, and that's when I start, you know, sort of, worrying about it. So I think sometimes, you know, being prepared, obviously, you know, and having, you know, giving yourself time, for example, before a meeting or a phone call, to make sure you've got everything there and you're not going to suddenly be flustered and things like that can help. But sort of dwelling on it too much in advance, I think, can sometimes be a bad thing. Nice. Yeah. And like you're saying, they're having those systems in place. I mean, you can take the emotion out of it because you don't have to think about it too far in advance, which is, that's really, really nice. Now, also just in terms of what you were saying there around the idea of repricing and having those conversations, I think it's really interesting that obviously what Marie was saying about being able to explore what the client wants and what they need will make that conversation a lot easier. So when you're having those repricing conversations with clients, how would you sort of blend in and bring in what they really want to achieve and what they're trying to achieve with their business from what you've found out previously using the models from the GAP? Yeah, so we've kind of merged the CCR and the GAP, which is the complementary client review. Apologies in advance if I use any what we call Gapanese. There's lots of acronyms in there, but CCR, so a complementary client review, which is effectively a review meeting of the business. But we've merged that with the gloss review process in GoProposal, and we've just built in what we call the annual review. And again, we've built in systems to do that. And it's an hour-long meeting. We generally follow the CCR, the GAP process of, you know, the meeting minutes. So we send out pre-work, which helps us to understand how the client feels that they've performed in the last year. It sort of gets them thinking about, what problems are in the business, and, you know, celebrating their achievements as well, but also sort of revising those sort of annual goals and their sort of shorter term goals and things like that. So really it's just, we've got the pre-work and we've got a little bit of information, and then in the meeting, really for about an hour of it, I mean, we don't actually always reprice our clients. Sometimes the service level is suitable, and we really use that process much more as an opportunity to, you know, just sort of reconnect with the client, catch up with them, see what their plans are for the next year, make sure that we've got their, you know, their latest life and business goals sort of noted down. But when we do have to reprice them, we'll have got the pre-work, so we'll identify potentially any issues that they've got in their business, so that we know that potentially that they're going to need an additional service from us. So I'm prepared, and I can have I know how to frame that service, I suppose, and selling that service. And then really the repricing side of it is, you've had a whole conversation for about 45 minutes about all the things, all the problems that they've had, and then you just say, well, I think actually we're going to need to, increase, do this level of service and, introduce this service. We have increased prices at times, on our actual line items in GoProposal, and that's sometimes caused a bit of confusion, and sometimes people are like, oh, well, why has my fee gone up from, whatever, 150 to 180 or whatever. But generally we've got a reason, and we've already communicated it in advance. But we don't tend to nowadays blanket reprice everybody. We'll just do it at the annual review stage. So we might tweak a few line items and GoProposal, and then as we do the reviews, they feed through and they sort of increase. But we've already explained to our clients why we've increased those prices, and generally it's because we've included something or taken something out or whatever, or like changed the way we deliver a service. So for example, recently, just after Christmas, we changed how we provide our bookkeeping services. So we changed the pricing, and actually some people's fees have gone down and some have gone up, but actually we're offering a better level of service for it. So we were able to communicate that with all of our clients in advance, and it wasn't really a surprise.
Brilliant.
I don't know if that answered.
No, that's amazing. Yeah.
I think I covered a lot of different things in there.
No, that's really, really good. I just know there's going to be so many people here that have that difficulty of repricing clients, and all the structures that Marie and Tamsin have covered so far from the Gap. You guys really should check these out, because I know it's a real pain point for so many people. And just on the repricing side of things there as well, James has built a really good resource around the bulletproof meeting agenda on that as well. So Morgan will help me share that afterwards if anyone's interested in seeing that, because I've shared that with a few guys as well, and they found that very useful. So that's awesome. Thank you so much for that, Tamsin. And again, guys, any questions around what's been said there, make sure you get them in the chat so we can cover those off at the end. Great. So I just want to come on to yourself now, Glenn, and I would love to understand what structures and rhythms you've put in place to make sure you're controlling existing client relationships in an effective way.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit like you mentioned before, Jack, in that, well, I guess when we first started out, we sort of had this focus on having this huge slick machine that everything came through, and we were driven by how quickly we'd file accounts after the year ends and things like that. And we'd obviously dropped the annual accounts review meeting, and we were just sending them out, getting them in e-signed, and thinking, oh, great, we've filed everybody within 3 months of the year end or whatever. And the technology, and I think in some ways, some accountants have over-adopted tech. Tech's great and AI is great, but you've got to remember that people are still the most important thing in what we do. That's why I do this. There will be a lot better accountants than me on the call, but it's the relationship side of it, which is what I enjoy, and it's what I do. So obviously when we joined the Gap and we went through, there's huge amounts of content in there when you first start using it. And it's like, well, what am I going to start with here? So the first thing we did was reinstate the annual accounts meeting. So instead of just sending the accounts out with a few notes, e-signed and then filed, we reinstated that meeting, because it's a good meeting. and that obviously, you get people in, you go through tax liabilities, etc. But also within the gap, they encourage you to book a meeting from a meeting. So when you're doing your accounts review, it'll be tax focused and things like that. But there will be things come out of that which can lead you to book a follow-up meeting. So it's another conversation about another topic, and it gets you away from that end of year meeting, if you like, because sometimes that meeting is a bit of a difficult one, in that you're talking about, how much tax ultimately somebody's got to pay. So they may not want to do a load of other things in that meeting. But like for instance, last week, we were just doing an annual review with a client. It was his first year end we'd done. We liaised them quite often through phone and email, but on the meeting, because it was a face-to-face meeting, so much more came out of it. He mentioned to me in the call that, in the meeting, that, his lease was due to expire on the unit that we're in within the 12 months. So that led me to say, well, why don't you look at buying your own unit? And then he said, what you can do that for us? Could you help us raise the money? Yes, of course we can. So from that meeting, we booked a follow-up meeting to look at, raising some money, finding a unit, buying his own place. So that's, a great thing that's come out of the meeting. Yet it didn't come out of just normal email and telephone correspondence. So we reinstate the annual accounts review. Also, PCR something we do everybody, and a bit like Tamsin mentioned, we obviously sort of blend that with a bit of a fee and service review as well. So the CCR is a great meeting because it's the client's meeting, so it's not tax led. So I find you get into a lot more under the skin stuff. You get into a lot more personal things. People will open up to you more about, houses, mortgages, pensions, all that type of stuff around. And it just helps you get such a better understanding of what they do, like you say, because the numbers don't always tell the full story. Particularly in the last 12 months, we have a total mixed bag of outcomes. We have some clients who've traded really, really well, so the accounts look great, but when you meet them, they're absolutely frazzled because they've had no team, and they've just been working 7 days a week themselves. So the accounts on the face of it, you think, wow, he's had a great year, but actually he like resents his business now. He's really struggled. Yet we've had some people who've been closed down a lot, who've recharged, made the business better, and although the numbers are poor, they're 100 miles an hour ready to get going again. So these CCRs bring it all back for that complete picture, because in a way that the numbers don't report a lot of that. And then obviously the third meeting that we sort of brought in straight away was the proactive accounting meeting for new prospects. So it's the pre-work goes out to everybody, and I just find with that the pre-work works on a number of levels, really, because somebody who's just ringing around 3 or 4 accountants to get the cheapest quote won't send the pre-work back, because they can't even be bothered. They just want to know a number. And so it's a great filter initially, and that people who are just sort of price shoppers don't really get engaged in it. But if you're up against 2 or 3 other accountants, where the client has just turned up to the other 2 meetings cold, said whatever their issues were, and then walked away with the price, because we're doing a lot of work before the meeting to set that meeting up for them, they feel like there's a lot more effort gone into it. I've had clients who say, oh, we felt special when we got all this through, because it's like you generally were interested in what our business is about and what we do, and yet you've never met us before. We haven't paid you a penny, yet you're already really interested in the business. So those 3 meetings were great. And then again, I do think the meeting from a meeting thing is huge, in that if you've got those 3 in place, then you can book quarterly reviews with people, around the year, and it just makes the whole thing work. Your clients become a lot more sticky to you. You're a lot more involved in their business, and you're part of their team. You share their wins. When they win a contract, because you've been involved in the whole process, you share that win with them, and it's great. They obviously tell other people, and the whole thing just snowballs from there, really.
That's amazing. And I love the idea of them feeling valued by the fact you put all that time in, because that's what we're talking about at the start, isn't it? It's all about actual building of relationships, meaningful relationships, where they feel like you care about their business. So that's really, really nice. Now, there's a question on the chat here that I know we're going to wait for the end for most questions, but Alan's raised a really good one here, which is, what proportion of review meetings lead to the booking of the next meeting? Is that fairly large? Is it fairly small in terms of that lead on meeting that you get?
I would say, it gets better all the time because we get better at doing it, and obviously it's about listening to it as much as you're taught, I guess, in these meetings. So we as a minimum, we'll always get like a financial service review from an annual review, because it just flows, one flows from the other. And then, like you say, like the one the other week about the guy who's now thinking about buying his own property, those will be less frequent. But I would say we 70-80% we can get a future meeting from just an annual accounts meeting.
Yeah, that's great. Fantastic. And a bit of a curveball here for you, Glenn, but what would you say to anybody who's out there thinking, well, I'm not going to have the time to deliver all these meetings? What would you tell someone who had that objection to this?
If I'm brutally honest, I would ask them what they're putting the time into then, because this is are you putting time into checking VAT returns and things like that, which really somebody else could do? Whereas this is the stuff that's, it's the gravy on the top of everything you do. This is going to make you the big fees, and this is going to keep your clients with you forever. So, I would look at, it's achiever matrix stuff, what you do, and you need to, this is quadrant 2 stuff, so you need to get into there and move out of these other ones you're putting your time into, really. And it's an easy one to say, you don't have time to it, but you just need to take that step back and just look at what you spend your time on.
Yeah, fantastic. Absolutely. It's looking at where you can bring the most value. I'm nicking the gravy on the top as well, Glenn. I like that saying. I'm having that one.
Right, I'm going to write a book of Benziisms for you. It's another one.
I'll buy that. Fantastic. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Glenn. I can see some questions coming in, guys, as well. So keep that up. Keep posting those questions. So I'll pass on to you now, Viv.
Oh, thanks, Jack. And Marie, I'm going to come back to you, because all of you have talked about the annual accounts review meeting, which is that of all the meetings that accountants have, and I go back to when I was in practice, that's the stock standard meeting. It's a really important meeting. But of course, at that meeting, we tend to have our advisor hat on, don't we? Because we're thinking about tax, how much tax to pay. So we have the advisor hat on, and we're the expert, and we tell our clients, don't we? They ask and we tell. But of course, when we start to get them to express their problems and challenges, the goals they want to achieve, the things that are worrying them, we have to take that advisor hat off, don't we? And we have to stop telling, and we have to start asking. So we have to put a coach hat on. And I know that a lot of accountants and bookkeepers don't necessarily love that word coach, but of course we've yet to find a better word to express. So the coach asks, the coach doesn't tell. So when you switch out from that annual accounts review meeting and you get into that proactive accounting meeting that Glenn discussed, or the complimentary client review, you're not telling your clients what to do, you are asking the questions. What is the transition like for an accountant going from being the advisor and telling to being the coach and asking? What's involved to make that transition?
Yeah, I'm going to hold my hands up. I am a recovering problem solver. I think, I don't know whether it's a natural thing for accountants and that's why I became an accountant. I don't know, but I want to solve problems. I love solving problems. It's probably why I set my business up. And so trying to switch and almost kind of sit on my hands to stop myself giving the answers because you want to be able to help as an accountant. You want to, we're used to having an answer to a question. We're used to finding a result, an answer, there's a right or wrong answer. But when you put that sort of coach hat on, you've got to use more of those listening skills and ask more questions, because it's really important that the client is involved in the answer, that they are accountable to the answer, that they sort of take responsibility for it, because it's actually them coming up with the answer sometimes just with the questions that we ask. And that's where you do get different results, because the client is, I can't think of the right word, but they want that result because it's their result that they've come up with. So the more we can not tell them the answer, we get the right answer, because it's actually what's right for the client, not necessarily a blanket correct answer.
We talk at the Gap about the ops mindset, for example. Where's the opportunity to add value? Now pause and don't blurt out the answer. Why is it And it's so easy to do, isn't it? We've almost been trained to serve. Would you agree with that? Yeah, and to help on the spot. Why is it important sometimes during those conversations that we don't just blurt out the answer? For example, their margin in their business may be down, and we might blurt out, well, we need to look at the pricing. Why is it important that we hold back from that answer and wait and ask the next question to see whether the client can come up with what the underlying problem is? Yeah.
I think because it's an area that we're the expert in, we can come up with the answer quite quickly. Whereas for the client, this is, it's not their area of expertise. So we need to allow them the time to process what we've just told them, to then, kind of process that in terms of what they know about their business, for them to be able to, come up with their reasons, what they think they should do, because ultimately they know their business, they know how their business works. And having that kind of awkward silence, which again, I am also very, not very good at leaving those awkward silences. And I know there was another accountant, I think it was in the GoProposal group, that said that she sings "Row, row, row your boat" in her head when there's a silence to stop herself. And I'm sorry, I can't remember who it was that said that, but I thought that was a brilliant idea. So as long as I don't start singing it out loud. But there we go, Penelope, there we go.
Wonderful.
But yeah, you do need to leave those awkward silences, because clients need to process what you're telling them. And as I say, because it's not their area of expertise, but their business is, they need to align the two bits of information, the information we've just given them and what they already know about their business, to then be able to come up with, some of the answers that they think. They may not be the right answers, and we can again guide them with some different questions, but the more that they can come up with the answers, the better for them.
And of course, we may be experts financially, but they are experts operationally on their business. And we have to remember that actually we may not know as much as we think we know about how the business actually operates. So that's really important. Yeah. And so when you get into these complimentary client reviews and these proactive accounting meetings for prospective clients, you're often, even in the pre-work or at the meeting itself, you're actually asking questions that you don't know the answer to often, aren't you?
Yeah.
And initially is that uncomfortable? Do you get to a point where it's actually quite exciting to ask a question of a client that you don't know the answer to?
Yeah, I think it is, because you get all kinds of different answers, because at the end of the day, we're all different. Everybody's business is different. And, the questions we're asking, there isn't, a definite right answer. It's what's right. The right answer is what the client gives, almost. So when we're talking about, what are their business goals? What are their personal goals? If we make assumptions about that, we may then offer the wrong services. But actually, if we listen to what the client tells us, what answer they give, we can actually provide a much better solution to the problem. So without jumping in there too early and missing key bits of information, the result is much better for us and much better for the prospect or client as well.
So for example, Glenn's example of the client coming in with a great looking set of accounts, business has done really well, but the client is miserable, right?
Yeah.
So we talk at the Gap about the 3 freedoms: time, mind, money. Yeah. And so by asking the questions in the pre-work around the business and personal goals, we might find out that actually they'd be happy making less money if they could just get their life back.
Exactly.
And as accountants, it might be easy for us to assume that it's about the bottom line. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, because that's what we can see. We see the figures. The figures are there. They're obvious. But it's actually what's happening behind those figures, what's happening around those figures. What is it taking to get to those figures? So like Glenn says, great, you've got the figures look really good. You've had a really good year in business, but the client's on their knees. They've had no break. They've seen less time with their family. And yet actually they started their business because they wanted more time with their family. Yet if we just looked at the set of figures, we can make totally the wrong assumptions. and not support the client to achieve what actually they really need to achieve behind the scenes. So, you know, what the services we deliver are about so much more than just the numbers. And you know, it's people. So as Glenn said before, you know, software's great, software can deliver lots of things, but we need to connect with the people. You know, we need to connect with clients, we need to connect with prospects so that we can really deliver the right service, we can really deliver the right solution for the client, because then you're going to have, you know, raving fans. They're going to, you know, really value what you deliver to them because it's solved their problems in the right way.
Oh, that's fantastic. So look, Marie, you may not realize how far you've come here. I mean, you may not realize how far you've come in a couple of years to actually get to the point now where you're pretty comfortable asking questions that you don't have the answers to.
Yeah. Still takes practice, but yeah, more conscious of what we're doing. Definitely.
Yeah. There's no perfection.
No,
is there? There's no such thing as this, and this is something for accountants to get our heads around. We're all born technicians. We tend to have a little bit of a perfectionist trait in us, don't we? And there's no such thing as the perfect question. There's simply a better question. It's never going to be perfect. Yeah. Definitely. Thank you. Thanks, Jack. I'm going to hand back to you now.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, Viv. So I just want to come on to yourself again, Glenn, just around all these goals we've got for our clients. Obviously, we're finding out what they're trying to achieve, but it's not just us working with those clients, it's also our team that's around us as well. So how do you align your team with your clients' goals? What's your approach for that?
I mean, for me, ultimately, the sort of higher end services are sort of all delivered by me, so that the business planning and all that type of stuff's done by me. But obviously, the staff understand the importance of what they do in that it's like a cascade effect. I always remember going back to my FD days, the owners of the business set the office up in a strange way, where the apprentices and juniors were at one end of the room, and everybody got more senior in tiers down the room. And then I sat at the end of the room. So everybody's problems came forward, but there was no desk behind mine. So that everything just come to my desk and that was it. But in a way, that's how it works. So obviously, I can only do my bit if the bookkeeping's right, if the payroll's right. So, you know, on your proposal, it lays out clearly for every client what you're doing. And so obviously, our staff understand the key component where, you know, it isn't just doing payroll. It's, you know, it needs to be done right. It needs to be done on time. Otherwise, all the rest of the better work doesn't flow, and ultimately, you know, you lose clients through mistakes and basic things. It's not, you know, nobody's going to, you know, you don't lose a report because somebody hasn't hit the target. You lose a client because the payroll's not right or whatever. So everybody understands, obviously, they're a key cog in the whole system. And obviously, at the end of the day, Jack, I'm not a young guy like you. I've got more years behind us than I've got in front. So I want to now pass on as much, you know, the next 10 years, I want to pass on as much knowledge as I can to obviously the people around us so they come through and take all that on. But ultimately, it's just understanding that, you know, they're not just churning out payroll and bookkeeping. It has a key part. I mean, I've spoken with Paul at Mappel about this a lot, how you can't do anything as an accountant until your compliance service is nailed down. You know, you have to have all that in, and that's obviously what the staff deliver, and they need to understand the importance of that. It isn't about just, you know, I've filed 500 invoices a day. It's about doing it right and doing it well.
Yeah, great. And how do you go about communicating that importance? What would be your approach for delivering that message to the team?
I mean, we share the proposal. So when we take on a new client, we'll say, well, this is what we've agreed to do, and this is what we're going to be paid for doing it. So obviously, you know, everybody has a key part in that. So if somebody say, well, actually, you know, that bit of pricing for the payroll is going to be wrong because it's out. So everybody needs to be in part of it, and everybody needs to feed back, you know, if they think things are right. But like, that's, you know, we're just trying to be as transparent as we can. So so everybody understands their role in it, and, you know, and obviously they could, you know, other people rely on them to do their bit before they can do theirs. So we're just as open as we can. And like I say, I think the GoProposal stuff allows you to do that because it couldn't be any clearer. Do you know what I mean? It's like, this is what we get paid per month, and this is each person's part of it. And it's as simple as that, really.
Yeah, that's amazing. Just the over communication, making sure everyone's aware of what's going on and creating that culture within the business. I think that's really nice. James always talk about creating a thriving culture within the business to allow you to service your clients properly. And I think that's exactly what you're tapping into there, Glenn. So thank you very much for that. So just again, guys, any questions, make sure you get those posted in the Q&A chat. I think we've got a challenge now to try and find the perfect question, because Viv says they don't exist. So I challenge one of you out there to ask the perfect question in the chat for us. So I'll pass back over to you, Viv. Crack on.
Thanks, Jack. Tamsin, look, I've got a question for you. When we get into, you know, the non-compliance meeting, for example, that complimentary client review, and where, you know, they've done their pre-work, we've got a good structure, we're really, you know, and the point of that meeting is to find out their business goals, their personal goals, their problems and challenges. And then, of course, we're going to show them how we can work with them to overcome some of those problems and challenges. It might be in the form of structured coaching, maybe it's starting with the annual business plan. At some point, we have to start selling. We have to sell, you know, that service that delivers the solution. Now, I know that accountants don't love that word selling. There was a time when I couldn't stand it. How have you overcome, how do you come across as really being the problem solver rather than that dreaded product pusher?
Yeah, so being salesy and selling has been my biggest sort of fear, I suppose. And so I have always managed to steer well away from it. But I think really it comes down to, you know, once you've gone through that whole process, if you've asked them, you know, what's keeping them up at night, what their problems are, and really sort of dragged them into that sort of, you know, what are the consequences going to be if you don't, you know, sort of solve those problems. Well, if you've got all of that, then it should be quite straightforward to just say, well, you know, look, you know, we can do this. And I always position it as a little bit of a choice. It seems like they've got a choice. You know, you kind of say, you know, look, we can do this for you, and that will help you, you know, because if you've got the consequences of what they're not going to do, you can kind of go, well, you know, look, if you don't want to just ignore this problem, and you know it's not going to go away on its own, so we can help you do this if you want. You know, we don't sit there and force them to do it. We're quite open. I quite often say, you know, it might not be right for you at this exact moment in time, and it might then be that again we book in a meeting, you know, for potentially 2 months down the line when they might be in, you know, in a better frame of mind to do it. Because I think sometimes what can happen is if there's a lot of things that need addressing and a lot of problems, it can be quite overwhelming to actually dump a whole load of services on them all at one point. So sometimes, you know, sometimes we'll just sort of drip feed it. But I think ultimately it comes down to, you know, if you've identified what their problems are and the consequences of not solving it, then actually it's very easy to just say, well, look, here's the solution, and you just position it as a solution. You know, they can say yes, they can say no, it's down to them, but you've generally got them into a sort of really miserable place. You know, you don't want anyone like, you don't necessarily want to be like making them cry, you know, or, you know, getting too emotional about it in the meeting. However, you know, if you have actually got the proper consequences of what's going to happen if they just continue to bury their head in the sand and not address it, then actually it should be very easy to do that. But again, I think just bringing it down to their level, you can potentially empathize, you could potentially give a situation, you know, relate it back to a client where something else has happened and they didn't take action. We've used that in a few situations. I've even used it in, you know, relating it back to my own personal experiences. And I think sometimes just showing that we're human as well can sort of help. You know, we're not just here pushing a service on them. It's actually going to solve the problems.
So it's really interesting and sometimes we might refer to that as a little bit of the valley of despair, you know, like you really don't leave them there. You can't leave them there. You've got to get them out of there as quickly as possible, because that's a miserable place to be. But being really honest about what will happen if they don't address those challenges, if they don't address those problems, where they might be in 6 months, is,
Yeah.
I would argue, I mean, you would argue that that is showing a ton of empathy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's being
Yeah.
really, really honest and getting them out of that place. Now, of course, what they might do is say, well, you know, I can sort this out myself, or I can facilitate my own business planning session, or I can grab a template online and or I can get my wife to do it with me, which would be an interesting scenario. and of course, and it's great. You can say to them that that's fantastic. I'm glad you're going to take some action. That's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Is it okay if I touch base with you in a month or so? And get permission to do that, because all is not lost. They probably won't have done anything, because it's very hard to do these things without somebody independent, you know, holding you to account. And then you get an opportunity to go, how did that go? Have you managed to build, you know, create your own business plan? Do you need some help with that? And so there's always an opportunity to get back in there and make sure they're doing what they need to be doing, so that they get the outcome they're looking for. Yeah.
Yeah, I entirely agree. And I think, you know, we've had situations, especially, you know, with it can often be around just a really basic thing like bookkeeping, where clients will go, no, it's okay, we'll try and figure it out for the next couple of months. And then you know, obviously we can log straight into it. I mean, obviously bookkeeping is a very easy one, because you can quite clearly see that it's not working, you know, and it's quite easy for us to just drop in and then go back and go, look, I can still see you're having problems, you know, do you need some extra training, or do you want us to take over? And actually, you know, for us, that's been quite an easy sell, because you've had an initial conversation, you've identified there's a problem. And as I said, like, you can't, you know, you can take a horse to water, you can't make it drink. And I think that's something that we do have to understand. You can position the services. And I think that's the thing, is that the more, again, it's, you know, the more meetings we have, the more conversations we have, the more they're aware of the services that we're providing, and they know that we can offer them and we can help them. You can't force them to take them up. I mean, obviously there are certain things that we do need to ensure that they take up, but, you know, it has to be the right time for them, I think. And, you know, sometimes I think
it's a really interesting thing you just said. The more meetings we have with our clients, the more conversations we have, the more we get the chance to actually position what we actually do. We're actually marketing at the same time as helping, aren't we? And it begs the question, before you started, you know, adopting some of these structures and really having better conversations and better meetings with your clients, did they actually all know what you could actually do for them?
No, very rarely. And, you know, we can send out all the client newsletters and, you know, marketing materials that we want, but in all reality, probably about 5% of our client base ever actually read them. And, you know, we'd introduce new services and people wouldn't know about them. And actually that's been one of our biggest focuses in the last year, as a result of COVID. It was sort of since sort of November and, you know, to date, really, our biggest focus has actually been on getting back that relationship with the clients, because we were firefighting for so long in 2020 that we couldn't have any of those meaningful conversations. And obviously for a lot of clients, you know, a lot of their life, you know, their personal situations have changed, and actually having those conversations enabled us to just kind of really sort of, I don't know, get back on track, I suppose, with the clients, figure out what it was that they were, you know, they now wanted moving forwards. I think, you know, the last year has put a lot of things into perspective and changed a lot of people's priorities, and they've suddenly realized, you know, all the things they can achieve. And so I just think, you know, having those conversations, identifying how we can, you know, help them. And I do feel actually, and I think, Glenn, you and I've talked about this a little bit, that actually some of them are now, you know, for all the talk of, you know, potentially like forecasting or management accounts, for so long, for so many years, clients have just buried their head in the sand, and they've suddenly realized the importance of it. And so just by having those conversations and going, you know, well, look, you know, you've got bounce back loan now, you know, you're going to be able to afford those, you know, repayments, and, you know, sort of selling those management accounts and a forecast and things like that to ensure that they can see,
and the plan,
see into the future, and the business plan, you know. And actually, I think that was something else, is that actually the business planning, I mean, we were positioning it as the business recovery plan last year, but when the bounce back loans first came out, it was like, well, actually, what are you going to do with your bounce back loan? You know, how are you going to spend it? What are your longer term goals? And, you know, not everybody, and in fact, most of my client base, I was very fortunate, most of mine weren't hit too hard. So actually, you know, the bounce back loan was able to sort of really give them a lot more security and stability for the future. And, you know, we were able to help assist them with, you know, spending their money wisely rather than just, you know, using it to plug a sinking ship. So
yeah. So really, are you a little bit more? I mean, at the Gap, we don't tend to use that word selling that much. I mean, we do. We talk about how, but we actually position it as just helping, offering services to positioning services to solve problems. That's all you're doing.
Exactly. I would never consider that I'm selling anything. In fact, someone told me recently that I was a very effective salesperson. This wasn't a client, I have to say. It was just somebody who'd obviously, I think they'd seen me at sort of networking events and things like that, and I think they recognized the fact that I wasn't sitting there pushing a service on anybody. It was literally just like, you know, here's how I can help, and if you need that help, you know, come and have a chat. And I do think that as accountants, we often underestimate the importance of that sort of working relationship. And, you know, we'll quite often just sit there and think all we're doing is a tax return and a set of accounts each year. But actually, you know, we can be so much more for those clients, and help them achieve so much more if that's what they want. And really that's, yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. I mean, at the end of the day, you're the only independent people that that your clients can come and talk to confidentially about their business in their life.
Yeah.
So
and I think, you know, for lots of startup businesses as well, we are their first port of call. You know, there are some who might have approached a business coach or I don't know, like a, you know, if they've gone through like an incubator or something, they might have a mentor or something like that. But actually, generally, we are their main port of call, and you know, we're asked about everything. So the more we can help them, you know, even if it's just by sort of shipping some work out to somebody else, but you know, quite often it'll be, you know, I've got to take on you know, my first employee, you know, what do I do? You know, and obviously we can help them for certain things, and then we help them, you know, we might put them in touch with an employment lawyer or an HR advisor or whatever. But yeah, I think providing them with a sort of a confident one-stop shop is going to, well, it'll do them the world of good, but also it's great for us as well as business owners, accountants and business owners, that it's good for our business if we can help them more.
It's really interesting. Last comment before I go back to Jack, all of the Gappies that we speak to, who you would say are very effective at selling these services, what they've done is they're confident, they believe in it. And we talk about the first sale being to yourself. They absolutely believe in what they're doing, and they never sell something a client doesn't need. And because they're so real about it, so authentic, that's why they're so effective, because it's real.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, you know, I think the more that we can, I guess, convey that emotion, and that we do really, really want to help. I think, you know, the better. It's actually, I mean, the reason I moved on to GoProposal, I don't know how many years ago it was, but when I first moved on to GoProposal, it was actually because I'd been doing the sort of gold, silver, bronze package, and I felt like I was selling services that clients didn't need, and it really didn't sit well with me at all. And I don't know if it's just that as accountants we're quite honest people, I don't know, or maybe it's just me, I don't know. But and so actually by tailoring everything to exactly what a client needs, you know, a service that they need is so much more effective. And I think if they know that they're only, you know, they're only being sold, they're only taking up services that are actually going to be of use to them and of value to them, it sort of puts that sort of trust and honesty, I suppose, into the relationship a bit better. And I think it makes it it's
the foundation of your relationship with your clients. Absolutely. Yeah. Fantastic. And Tamsin, man, you've come a long way, haven't you? So yeah, it's pretty amazing. Okay, Jack, over to you. I know you've got you're going to go to Q&A now, I think.
That's great. Yeah, and Tamsin, like that reimagine of selling and the way you position that there is so important. I think there's a lot of people that will connect with that. And as Phil has put in the chat there, if you ask the right questions and identify problems that need to be solved, then the sale will naturally follow. And I think that really captures what we need to be thinking about there when we're thinking about sales. So yeah, thank you so much for that. Awesome. Okay, guys. So we'll come on to the Q&A now. I know we've had a few of the questions answered as we've been going, so there's only a couple in there. If there's any other questions for all the guys that are still out there, please put them in the Q&A and we'll make sure we run through those. But the first one we've got in here is from Wendy. And Wendy just asking if there's any pre-work examples that we're able to share. Is there anything we can share with Wendy on that?
So I might pop in there. Obviously, you could actually, I think we're putting a link up to the GAP trial page in there. That'll unlock the CCR and business planning bridge, and you'll be able to go in there and see some examples of the pre-work there. That's one thing we could do. But, you know, for example, in the business planning pre-work, it just asks simple questions. It's probably about a page and a half a question, page and a half once they've done their pre-work. It'll ask questions like, what are your short-term goals over the next 12 months? What are your longer-term goals? What are the biggest problems in the business right now? What's the critical problem that needs to be solved in the next 12 months? You know, what are the biggest opportunities? What are the 3 biggest opportunities in front of the business right now? So they're quite sensible questions. You keep the pre-work very light. You don't want it to be too onerous. You want to get the gold. And here's a hint for Wendy. If you're having any client meeting, I mean, I would never conduct a meeting without pre-work, because the meeting needs to have purpose. Even if you've got a client that rings you up and says, I need to come and I need to talk to you tomorrow for an hour. I've got a challenge with my business partner, for example. I would send them 3 questions to try and get some information about the problem prior to the meeting, to get the client to think about the problem and to actually start to express what's under the surface and the underlying cause of the problem before you get into the meeting. Just come up with 3 questions. Doesn't matter what they are. Get the client to think about what's under the surface before they come to the meeting, and you'll have a better meeting and they'll think you're marvelous. Yeah. So I don't know if guys, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's about having a better meeting, and I think is over the last 12 months, sometimes when you had this instant switch to Zoom, sometimes the Zoom meetings went a long time and didn't really cover a lot. But I just think the pre-work just controls the whole meeting, in that you're really prepared for the meeting prior to it starting. It allows you to have quite a strict agenda on the day, and then you finish with the action points going forward. So it just gives you a lot of structure, and it gets your meeting times down and allows you to have a better meeting. Whereas initially, when the whole Zoom thing happened a year or so ago, we were spending full days on Zoom, and at the end of the day, you were like, well, what have I actually achieved today? Because it lacked structure and things like that. So it just, for me, it's all about preparation for the meeting. So where you start off punchy in the meeting, you know, because if somebody's told you effectively all their issues in the pre-work, then obviously you're positioning to come up with a solution for that, so, rather than doing the fact finding in the meeting. So the meeting ends up a 2-hour meeting. So much better.
And they're providing the content for the meeting, and their content becomes the agenda. So yeah.
I think sometimes as well, by asking some questions beforehand, sometimes when a client asks for a meeting, it doesn't necessarily need a meeting. So it's not that we don't want to meet with them, but it's actually making sure that when you are meeting with them, that it's a worthwhile meeting that is valuable for both of you. So by asking those questions beforehand and getting the client to actually sort of articulate what it is they're having a problem with, what they need help with, sometimes it may just be a phone call that can cover it off. So again, from that sort of time, valuing everybody's time point of view, that can be quite useful way of doing it as well.
Amazing. That's really nice. I hope that answers that for you, Wendy. That's a very thorough response there. Is there any other questions out there, guys? Anything else anyone wants to ask? I know we've got a few in the answered section of the Q&A, but Is there anything else anyone wants to raise? Anything we've missed in the chat at all? All good?
There's a question from Tim about how we track the client conversations, whether it's to call back with. I don't know if that's. I think Marie covered some of that off, but I think, you know, for us, it's just about making sure that we actually log the actions that you know, that need to be carried out by us and by the client, and making sure that we sort of put a deadline on that, and making sure that everyone's followed up with, you know, both internally and externally. And I think, you know, the GAP format is, you know, here's the action, when's it got to be done by, and who's the owner of that action. And I think that's something that's really important for us as well, because I mean, obviously for us, the problem has become around where we actually then log those actions, because they're obviously there and we've been sent off to the client. But, you know, we've now sort of implemented an internal structure of how we keep track of all those tasks and actions. But I think, you know, just having that, it just enables us to, you know exactly what everyone's working towards, and when, and what the time frame of that is, and whether we need a conversation or a meeting or whatever, and we can just go from there.
Yeah, I think it's that structure again, isn't it, around, you know, making sure that these aren't just extra things, they're all part of a process. So whether it's the annual accounts process, you know, everything's built into that process, including the meeting, you know, and recording the minutes after the meeting. Where you save them, well, you know, really, I guess, depends on the system, maybe some of the systems that you use. So we use Infusionsoft, and we keep any key points as notes so that the whole team are aware. You know, I share with the team the goals that the clients talked about, or any key things that are coming up, so the whole team are aware of what's going on, because everybody's having interaction. So it's really about making sure that it's part of your process. So whatever bits of the GAP or GoProposal you use, they're not just standalone things. You really build them into the process and work out, you know, how do you currently capture the information from meetings and everything like that, and just really build it into the process. That kind of is what we do.
Really nice. Awesome. And we've got a question here from Esther, who's asked if, Viv, you could repeat the questions you asked before the meeting, if that's okay.
The examples I gave you just before were for a business planning session. And they're different. We've got several different pre-works sitting in the GAP. So I can't sort of trot them all out. I can remember many of them. But for example, for an annual accounts review meeting, you can ask questions such as, what insights do you have from your latest financial statements? So what you're trying to find out is, have they read them? Do they understand them? Is there anything you don't quite understand in your financial statements that you'd like to go over? You know, are there any surprises in there that you'd like to discuss? How did you go this year compared to how you thought you would? Are there, you know, so you're looking at financial awareness. Where are they on that sort of financial awareness spectrum? Do they need more help than perhaps they've admitted in the past, because it's not something clients necessarily feel comfortable telling their accountant initially, that they don't understand the reports they've been getting for years. And then, are there any particular problems and challenges you would like to discuss at the meeting? And yeah, so really you can ask whatever you like, but what you're trying to do is find out what they understand, what they don't understand, what their problems and challenges are, the goals they're working on, and how you can help them achieve those. So it's not just the numbers. That's the key. Yeah. So yeah, and I've a question from Paul there. Maybe we can get some of the other panelists to answer this. If I wanted to start using the GAP, what would be the first thing I should implement, and why? That's a good question. I'm going to leave it to you guys on that one.
I think Marie and Glenn have both typed a response, so but I can answer it live. I was actually just typing a response now, but I think really what Marie had said was actually, for me, I think, and this is the approach that we took, was about looking at what meetings you've already got and just improving them. So for us, we were already doing a version of the gloss review that we'd taken from GoProposal after reading Selling to Serve. And we were already doing that, but actually we found that by merging it with the complementary client review bridge and the gap, that we were actually able to sort of drill down a little bit more and sort of learn, again, it's about asking all those questions. So I think, we did already have that. Glenn was saying, reinstate the annual accounts meeting and improve, and sort of use that as your starting point. Which I just think, start with the meetings. I think, introduce that, and then you're also introducing the concept of pre-work. You're getting them to think about things, and then really, I think for some people they find that a little bit difficult because potentially they've joined the gap because they want to deliver business planning or coaching services and things like that. But actually, if you can get those foundations in place and get those meetings sort of working effectively and sort of slightly reframing the potentially the relationship that you have with your existing client base, where you've never had these types of conversations before, I think it's quite a good introduction into that sort of type of relationship. And really, and I guess then we moved from the CCR or the annual review meeting to the proactive onboarding. So again, we sort of tweaked our discovery call process. That again, we'd created a format over the years of the questions that we would ask our clients. And actually, we now use the proactive accounting meeting. I can only ever think of it as Pam in my head. I find it difficult to say the full word, Pam. So, we've now merged all of that, and that's the process that we follow for our discovery calls. And we've actually just found that has been so much more helpful at really understanding what our clients are working towards. So for me, it's been those two. The annual accounts meeting is actually the one that we don't have in our business, because we felt that our core meeting was actually the annual review one was actually looking ahead, so that really when it came to the annual accounts, we'd really already discussed everything that was going to happen in the annual review. But it is something that we are now looking at implementing now that we've got everything else sorted. I've been using the GAP now for 2 years, and I'm still only using quite a small percentage of it really, but it's about, for me, obviously we have had a pandemic in the middle of it, I suppose, so I'll be kind to myself. But actually, I think, just getting those foundations in place is so much more important. And now it's looking at, okay, who in my team actually, rather than me, can deliver that annual accounts meeting. And that's something that we're going to look at implementing in the next sort of 6 to 12 months. Although I think the thing is for us is that, especially because we work with a lot of micro clients, is that actually there isn't really much. I know there's always something to say about the annual accounts, but actually there isn't for a lot of our clients. There's just not very much to say. So we will be using that as a, because we already send our accounts with a 5-minute Loom video, just walking them through it. So what we're going to be doing is offering that annual accounts review meeting as an option if they want to discuss it further. So it's not going to be a core meeting that we're offering as a, as a sort of an obligatory meeting, I suppose. We're still keeping that annual review as our core focus at the moment.
That's great. All three of you have said better meetings, get your meeting structure in place is the first thing you do out of the gap. And then the business development work, the business planning, the cash flow management coaching, the quarterly reviews and coaching, it'll come. But get your foundations right and change the relationship you've got with your client. Yeah. So it's not purely focused on the tax and compliance.
Yeah. But I think also, if you've only been doing a sort of compliance or potentially been doing a little bit of advisory work, and you just suddenly start throwing business planning at them, they're going to look at you and go, well, who are you to do a business plan with me, really? I think whereas if you can with those meetings you start asking them those questions, then it will be a little bit more understandable. Then you can then go, well, let's do a business plan, let's look into this in a little bit more detail. So yeah, that's kind of where we are. It's about the long game, playing the long game, really.
Yeah, it is.
That's it. It is the easiest place to start is with the existing meetings you're having, because even from that, because of the way the meetings are delivered and the questions that you're asking, the things like cash flow forecasting and the business advisory things will naturally come out of those where they're needed. Whereas actually, as Tamsin says, if you start with the big chunky items, it's, it takes more to implement it in your business because it's a new service. You then got to sell it, whereas you haven't got all the other structure around it, which is a lot simpler to implement first and let the other things come out naturally. If you need to create a business plan all of a sudden because the opportunity has arisen, the great thing is the structure's there. With version 1, you can literally just deliver it and follow the structure there. But yeah, I think really it's finding the things that are going to get you going quicker, and those existing meetings that you're already having, and thinking about kind of, how you can implement things within what you've already got is the easiest way, rather than trying to create new things in your systems.
Great.
Awesome. We've got another question from Tim here as well, guys, which is, if financial awareness is a consistent problem with your client base, how can you overcome this? Who wants to tackle that one?
I mean, for me, it's about obviously speaking to the clients in a language they understand. So most clients don't really get, a 20-page set of stat accounts. They don't understand what the notes are and things like that. But obviously, it's through having regular meetings and regular discussions with people, you will find on what matters to them. So, if turnover is a key figure to them, then you just build a report that works for that. If I'm honest, we don't use loads of the fancy reporting tools now because, we don't just churn out 30 reports to everybody. We'll give information that the client needs or will benefit from. So we maybe just use the basic zero information and tag a couple of spreadsheets on, so to give him the numbers that matter to him. Because at the end of the day, really, most businesses, there's 3 or 4 key metrics they need to know. And if they've got that information, that's all they need to know. So, we do a lot of hospitality stuff. So all people want to know is turnover, GP and staff costs to sales. And that's the 3 figures they want. So you give them the 30-page pack, which wouldn't matter. All they want to know is those 3 numbers. So it's just not, it's this thing of not speaking in Accountanese, speaking a language people understand, and then just building the information so that's easily readable. Now, one of the great things in the GAP, which I love, is the business plan, because as accountants, you would assume a business plan is like a 30-page document with loads of graphs in and 5-year forecasts and all this that you would give to a bank to raise for a loan, and then it would just sit on a shelf and never be looked at again. But the GAP business plan is a 1-page document. It's an A4 sheet. Mine's pinned on my wall just there, and it's there. And clients just love it because it has all your targets on and your goals for that year on a single A4 document. So it's easy to read, easy to understand, and it's easy to communicate around others. And I do think, like I say, a lot of accountants maybe overcomplicate things because they love producing numbers and graphs and things like that. But ultimately, you've got to produce something that the guy listening to you can understand, and that's why it's called the gap, I guess. You're bridging that gap between what we do and what business people understand.
Yeah. I mean, we tend to have a love affair with those numbers, don't we, Glenn?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, clients don't. Yeah.
I think that's it. I think, identifying the numbers that are important to them. I think, sometimes we can get carried away with, all of the different metrics that they could potentially be measuring, or, most of my clients know nothing, and actually those are really the ones that we try to attract, because it's very easy for us to sell the sort of peace of mind and the clarity, because we talk in a sort of normal layman's terms. I mean, we have realized there's a couple of clients that we've taken on recently who have also asked us to do everything. And actually, it was something that I was having a conversation with a couple of days ago, is that actually the problem is we've taken on a couple of clients where they've wanted us to do everything for them. And the problem is with that is that they don't really have any involvement with their business at all. And we're getting asked the most inane questions, and it's taking up a lot of our time. And actually, I've now decided that I'm going to be offering, so there's a financial awareness coaching bridge in the GAP, which I've not actually used before, but I'm now going to create you know, a sort of program, I suppose, that I can then deliver to some of those clients, and it will be in a group format, but I'll be doing that probably from the end of this year, because actually I have recognized that the more we do for clients, the less involvement they have, potentially the less they're aware. And actually I think they do need to take that responsibility and ownership of running a business. You can't just go, I don't want to deal with the numbers. You can deal with all of that, and absolve themselves of the responsibilities. So it's really about getting them to understand, you know, what is important to drive their business forward, and what they do, you know, what gets measured gets improved. I think that's the saying, or have I got that totally wrong? I don't know. Something like that. Anyway, but yeah, you know, so it's about helping them understand, you know, well, what are your goals? Okay, well, here are, you know, 3 KPIs that you've got to focus on, and actually scrap the rest. As long as you know that it's profitable and you've got everything else sorted out, then, you know, those 3 KPIs are really the most important things that you need to focus on.
Yeah, I think there's definitely kind of an education piece there, I think, which everyone's touched on, is, you know, how many times have we moaned about clients because they've made decisions that made no sense, or they didn't ask us beforehand, or they didn't have any figures and they've made the wrong decision. But so I think, you know, we have got a kind of an educator role in terms of raising that financial awareness. And that's one of the nice things in the Gap, is that there are some webinars that you can run. And we've run a few of those, so around building a better business. So really helping business owners understand their business more, as Tamsin says. And so although, yes, we might do a lot of work for them behind the scenes, we're making sure that they still understand what's important to their business. How can they make their business better? How can they control cash flow better? How can they make sure they get paid on time? You know, all these things, you know, we have the ability to deliver, and, you know, they're there for us to deliver as well. So, you know, really sort of bringing up clients' knowledge, so that they then in turn become better clients. So, you know, as James always says in GoProposal, is that, you know, we create the clients that we've got. So, you know, we need to kind of help them become better clients in the way that we deliver services and what we accept from them. So really kind of helping them understand the numbers is a great opportunity there to make them better clients.
Fantastic. Yeah, what a great response you got there, Tim. So we've got another question from Elliot as well here. So is there a minimum client fee level or turnover size that you use before you apply the Gap process to the client?
No, I think it depends. You know, we wouldn't necessarily apply everything in the Gap to every client. You know, the Gap is about the sort of process, the natural processes that we do deliver. So, you know, whether, you know, some clients might just have the annual accounts review meeting and benefit from that. You know, maybe the complementary client review, the acronyms are much easier to say. So it's not necessarily about saying, right, this size of client right now, here we go, here's the Gap, we implement it. It's about building the mindsets and the processes into what you deliver, and depending on the clients that you work with will depend on, you know, what bits of the Gap they touch, really. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we sort of look at sort of 5 levels of service. So level 1 is like a compliance-based job, and level 5 is somebody who's bought into the full, you know, business plan, quarterly meetings and forecasts. And then we'll try and get everybody to move up a level over the year. So obviously there's clients who are at all stages of that 5-step journey. So obviously people on level 1 are just a compliance job, they will still get a CCR. So everybody who's got a real business will get a CCR. We don't really do them for like tax only or like landlords, people like that, but we do everybody who's a business client. And then, like I say, it steps up. So, you know, each tier would bring in more Gap services, if you like. So people on 5 are effectively getting the full package, and then people in between get bits and pieces of it. But it's your journey's got to start somewhere. So you can start with your compliance clients, get them used to the extra meetings, and then obviously that's where, you know, from this booking a meeting from another meeting, you make your clients aware of what extras you can do, and obviously they might highlight issues they're having as their business grows, which can lead to, you know, the need for further services, if you like. So it's applicable for everybody. It just depends on where people are on that journey.
Yeah, we haven't applied anything either. As far as I'm concerned, every client is a prospect as well. You never know, it's kind of going back to that assumption that even if they're just a tax only client, which actually a lot of our sole traders are, they're still running a business effectively. Well, we don't tend to deal with individuals. So they're just, tiny little sole traders, but actually even a sole trader with a turnover of 20,000 might have sort of ambitious goals, or we can help them and we provide them with value. And actually, we look at our sole traders as almost like a bit of a sales force, because they're very easy to do a good job for, because it's very basic and very simple. And actually, the majority of our referrals actually come from those sole traders. So we kind of look at it as a free form of advertising and marketing, really. And actually, if you can look at that part of your client base as a, sort of, a referral source, I suppose. So, again, this year, after we got past the 31st of January, our focus was solely on February, and in March was about doing those CCRs for our tiny little sole traders and getting them all out. And it was totally exhausting. I think I was doing about 10 a week. But because I knew that for the majority of them, their service level wasn't going to change, and they didn't, we've got a flat rate fee for those clients, that I didn't need to do any repricing. We actually just did it as a half an hour meeting. But it was enough, because actually for some of them, we identified that, there was more work that they needed from us, or whatever, and a further conversation was needed. So that half an hour was just enough for us to sort of regroup after, a dreadful year, have a little chat with them, have a bit of a catch up, identify what their goals were, and then just move forward from that. So, these are people who are paying me, 200, 300 pounds a year. But, they're still just as worthy of our time and conversation, I suppose, as someone paying us £1,000 a month. So as far as I'm concerned, anyway.
Fantastic. Brilliant. So there's all the questions that we've had in there, guys. Is there anything else anyone wants to ask? Any other comments? We've still got quite a few guys out there. Is there anything we've not covered? So we'll look through the chat, make sure. Great. Brilliant. Okay, well, I think we're all good there, guys. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. It's been amazing to have you all here. Thank you, obviously, so much to all of the panelists as well. Thank you to Viv, Tamsin, Glenn, and Marie. Just before we get moving forward, Viv, can you tell the guys what the best way is to give the gap a go, what they should do if they're really interested in what they've heard today?
Well, they can, I think a link has been posted to our trial page, so they could pop in there and take a trial. They could reach out to Phil in the UK, Phil Sayers. He's on our website, and Phil will give them an in-depth tour. But yeah, we'd love to have you on board. But don't take my word for it. Just listen to these fine people. And all I would say is that it is a new way of working, and it is, we believe it's the right way of working with clients, is to really make no assumptions about what their goals are, what they need from us, what they don't need from us, and really find out by having better meetings. And that's really the first pathway in the gap, is to have better meetings. The business advisory and business development services like business planning and quarterly reviews and coaching, that'll come. But yeah, just sharpen up on the meetings you're having and really put some structure around it, and it'll make a big difference to your client relationships. And no doubt the team haven't talked about how having a great meeting structure for that proactive accounting meeting for future clients, for example, that will bring you more leads, that will get you more referrals. So yeah, have a talk to Phil, have a look, and if we're right for you, we're right for you. If we're not, we're not. So
fantastic. Thank you very much, Viv. And obviously, if there's any guys out there that aren't using GoProposal and you're interested in how you can systemize your pricing, get a little bit more confident in those conversations that we've been talking about today, then you can start a trial at GoProposal.com. You can reach out directly to myself, Jack at GoProposal.com. More than happy to chat to you guys. We can have a demo of the system. Just let us know. We love talking to you all. So brilliant. Yes, that's everything, guys. just again, thank you so much to the panelists for taking a chunk out of the day to do this, especially for you, Viv, where it's very late at night now for you. So I really appreciate that. And for everyone who's joined, I really hope that was useful for you, and we look forward to seeing you all soon.
Yeah, thanks guys, and thanks Tamsin, Marie, Glenn, you were great, natural, and it's just comes natural to you to do what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
See you later.
Okay.